Oracle announced an incredible quarter. And the biggest things, though, that were pretty shocking were kind of buried a bit in the notes and in the conference call. And it all comes down to this forward contracted revenue that they have coming out for the rest of the year. So it's all on the back of OpenAI, first and foremost. And it really just shone a light on how much Oracle has been betting in this ecosystem on their own infrastructure, on their own cloud environments. And now it's finally starting to pay off. This is incredibly significant for them.
We need this energy transition. We have this massive advantage of getting energy sold right now. That's why I was supportive of the LNG for sure. In using the LNG to particularly replace the coal-fired plants, I think that's fantastic from a sustainability perspective, but I think you gotta place your bets.
Hey everyone, before we dive into today's Tank Talk, a quick word from our sponsor, Fasken. If you're an early stage founder navigating the legal side of startups, chances are you'll need someone like Will Shaw in your corner. Will is a partner at Fasken, and he is here to help us break down some of the common startup legal questions we get all the time. Will, thanks for joining us in the Tank today.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
You know, Will, a lot of early stage founders that we deal with at Ripple, and obviously you deal with on a daily basis, are debating so many different things when it comes to working with investors and partners. The first thing we always ask is, should I raise a safe note or go after a priced round? So first off, what's your perspective on this, and what are the key differences a lot of founders should know about the two?
Yeah, safes are definitely faster, but they kick the conversation down the road on a few important things. Like, for example, a safe will defer setting a valuation, which makes things simple up front, but it can lead to unexpected dilution down the road if you're not managing your cap table. A price round is setting the valuation now, so everybody knows what they're going to own in the company, but it's also giving away a little bit more in the sense of rights. So a founder really needs to watch how much their dilution they're taking on, and also think about what rights they're giving away and what the timing is for crystallizing all of those things.
Right. And there's a lot of these in-between things that people also try to jam into safe notes because they are a little bit faster, but they want a little bit more protection,
Yep.
which we call side letters. So we hear about them a lot, Will, especially in more competitive rounds. You know, what are some of the factors that founders should think about and look out for when an investor asks for a side letter?
Side letters can be useful, especially when the safe is a standard form. And exactly to your point, Matt, you're trying to get other rights in there. So they can give specific rights to special investors, like pro rata rights or extra information or board observer seats that aren't in the main deal. But founders should make sure they're not creating long-term risks or burden or giving one investor an unfair advantage that might scare off future investors.
Yeah, I know. We definitely obviously like having side letters as well, being institutional investor where safe notes may be a faster path, but there are certain things that investors need to have in protection when they're not doing a price round. You know, we have worked together on many transactions with you and your team, Will. You guys have been fantastic partners of ours, but a lot of things that happen at the beginning of a company's journey kind of end up biting them in the butt on the other side when they either exit or sell the company. Many think about acqui-hires or M&A transactions, and we all face it. Not every company is going to go public. They often get acquired early and go through these acqui-hire scenarios. What are some of the things that founders should think about from a legal standpoint, if they're going forward with an acqui-hire or some type of M&A transaction?
Just start early. Keep track of your documents as you're going through things. Make sure they're in a data room. Make sure your IP is properly assigned. You make sure your contracts are clean. There are a lot of things that are simple to do at the time, but are really difficult to fix later on. And an acquirer is going to dig into everything, especially IP, the team agreements. If those aren't buttoned up, you're going to lose a lot of leverage and you may end up killing the deal.
Yeah. And also keeping track of all this information is really important, especially for obviously when you want to work with lawyers because they're not always in your business all the time. So you got to catch them up on a lot of things. What other things do you think founders should do to be prepared for the unexpected?
One of the things they can do, especially in the M&A context, hire some good advisors too. Like bring in an M&A advisor, for example, to help you navigate the negotiating the commercial side of the deal or the financial side of the deal. Make sure you've got a good finance team. And if you don't have a super strong finance team who's helped you through acquisitions, work with an outside advisor who can help you on the finance side with getting your financial statements in order. Again, all of this stuff is easier the earlier you bring the advisors in, and they can really help you avoid some unexpected outcomes down the road.
Well, we always refer to your team as like that outsourced in-house counsel for startups. Can you explain what that looks like in practice for someone who's maybe never worked with the Fasken team before?
We think about when you have in-house counsel, you're not concerned about calling them. You're not concerned about, going to them and talking about your risks. And we want to play that role for early stage companies. So we want founders to call us. And that means we need to generate a special kind of relationship where you feel comfortable calling us and we can have those really candid, strategic conversations. And you know that we're going to be there to help assess those risks and to do it in a practical way where we're not worried about boiling the legal ocean. We're worried about how do we make sure the company gets from point A to point B, and what do we really need to do today?
Yeah, Fasken's also super active in the startup scene here in Canada. You're a part of CDL, Techstars, Founder Fuel. Why is that so important to you and the team at Fasken?
It kind of comes back to a core value we have, which is just be helpful. It's been a core value the team's had predating me. It's just something that the firm does too. And I think about if you're part of the technology ecosystem in Canada, you have an obligation to give back. You have an obligation to get involved and support the founders. It's really hard to build a business these days, especially hard to build a business over the last couple of years. We're there because we want to be helpful. We want to educate people. We want to make sure that they're not stepping on legal landmines. I was just doing another presentation this morning. We do lots of presentations, lots of free office hours. We want to be out there and be helpful.
Yeah, you guys have also been a part of so many founder success stories. Before we wrap up, Will, I would love it if you can share maybe one big founder tip for anyone out there who's trying to get their startup to the next level, whether it's the next funding round or the next exit. What are one of the things that you see the best founders do to make those things become a reality?
The best founders that we work with, they just surround themselves with good people. It's good counsel, it's good investors, it's good advisors, it's people who've been there before, they've done it, they have experience, they're practical, and really their interests are aligned and they're all rowing in the same direction.
Yeah, these are awesome insights, Will. Thank you so much to you and the Fasken team for supporting Tank Talks. All right, now let's get into today's episode. All right, John, welcome back to the tank. It's just me and you here, I'm sorry to say, after Michael Hyatt's pop in.
Yes.
I think we had a great time. Maybe we'll have him back again
Pretty
soon.
good.
But let's cover off some stuff happening in the news that everyone wants to talk about. So, Carney has announced some major projects and also not announced some major projects. Let's start with the things that they did announce, though. They are talking about fast tracking some projects under their new Liberal bill, announcing 5 major projects around the Building Canada Act. So we've got the headliner, which is the LNG Canada expansion in Kitimat, BC. You've got some small modular reactors in Darlington, Ontario, some stuff happening in Montreal at the ports, and yada, yada, yada. So I think the question is there's going to be some more news coming out, I think, in the next little while, maybe the next 30, 60 days. But no pipelines announced, despite Alberta Premier's Danielle Smith's push, and also around her calls to repeal barriers like C-69. So with everything going on leading up into this fall budget announcement, how are you feeling so far with the announcement we've heard so far?
I'm glad they were announced. I mean, it's a step in the right direction. And again, I even saw Danielle's response to the lack of pipelines, and she was like, okay, hey, it's on the list. It didn't make the first 5, and I get it. What we should be focused in on is the execution now. And they have said that it will be subject to Indigenous and to environmental concerns. I'm trusting that that's not a cop out, but rather that is, giving due consideration, which I don't think anybody disagrees with, but I hope that's just not an excuse. But if they can execute on these, I mean, that's what we asked for. So, what's the only thing that was just bothering me about this though? Didn't we just spend, was it 7 years maybe-ish with the previous Liberal government saying that there was no market for this LNG, and now there is a market? Like, what changed in the world in that 7?
There's always been a market, John,
Exactly.
just to be clear.
Exactly. That is the thing that's really annoying me. So were we bullshitted this whole time? And we were being told that there wasn't, and now there magically is. So kudos to Tim Hodgson for having those discussions. But again, I know I'm going back in time, but it was just frustrating that you and I have been complaining about this for years, and it's turning out that this government is calling out the previous administration and calling the bullshit.
I mean, when you have your largest trading partner and the biggest economy in the world saying drill baby drill, energy is the only way out of our fiscal fiasco in the US. How could you do anything else as your closest partner besides keeping up with the energy that they need and being a bridge to helping them and ourselves out of this situation?
Yeah.
I find it very interesting that you can hear the thing that people want the most and being probably the most aligned to giving it to them in terms of supplying energy to ourselves and to our U.S. partners, and still not willing to fulfill that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. Now, what's also interesting, though, too, is I read this from Eurasia Group a couple of weeks ago. It was an interesting stat. They're showing China versus the United States in terms of their capacity of wattage from an electrical perspective. And I can't remember what the numbers were. It was quite similar, but the US was vastly carbon based, and
Of
China
course.
is
Yeah.
vastly renewable based. What I liked about this investment here, though, too, is that they included nuclear uh, in those five there, because we can't bet all red on carbon base. It's an immediate advantage, but I like the fact that we're going to spend some dollars finally again in nuclear.
Yeah, this is a relevant topic because the energy minister or secretary of energy in the U.S. was just speaking at the All In Summit. And he was asked specifically about this, like, how is China able to produce so much more energy with more renewable means versus the U.S. when we obviously have the capabilities to do it? And what he said was, we will get there, but it's not as reliable. First off, okay, you can't have wind farms and solar farms available 24/7 a day when we need them for hospitals,
Sure.
infrastructure requirements, things like that. So carbon is a way to bridge the gap when those things are down. Natural gas being the cleanest, obviously, coal being the worst, and oil kind of in the middle. So they're not saying that solar and renewables are not a thing in the future that we don't want to be building, but we can't do that now when we need it today. And so having that sort of structure, nuclear being the best of all, but obviously having its own political and environmental, restraints, people are still believing in it as the future. And that's what the US is hopefully going to deliver on.
I hope so. I mean, I get the point on the wind, but on the solar in the red states was the fastest growing renewable energy, and Trump just pulled the credit as of 2027. So it was a little disturbing that he did that. I get it that you don't support, say, EV, et cetera. I can kind of get it on the consumer front, but those incentives on the build out of solar parks in the United States was surprising, and a step I thought in the wrong direction for the United States as well.
Would you be for spending our tax dollar money on subsidies for something that is not 100% foolproof in terms of its reliance and still takes many years to get to the scale of what you could already get today with, say, carbon-based or nuclear-based supply lines, John?
I would do that, but in balance of the two. So use our advantage of carbon-based energies in the short term, short to medium term, but ultimately in the long term. We need this energy transition. We have this massive advantage of getting energy sold right now. That's why I was supportive of the LNG for sure. And using the LNG to particularly replace the coal-fired plants. I think that's fantastic from a sustainability perspective, but I think you got to place your bets. And for me, this is me personally,
Mhm.
solar and nuclear, particularly nuclear fusion, is the exact same energy. One creates it from the sun, and one is replicating the sun.
So China, though, is not actually that strong in solar. So China is the world's largest primary energy producer, accounting for a quarter of the global output. Its production is driven heavily by coal, though. 58% of its total is coal, followed by oil and natural gas. And then hydro is based, renewables and hydro contribute almost 14%.
Yes,
Or sorry, just less than 10%.
but
The United States is actually doing much better.
if you look at where it's coming on stream, is the issue.
Oh, so in the future. Yes,
Yes,
of course. So
for
you're saying
on
building for the
stream,
future.
and that was the
Understood.
issue, and what they had also done is they cornered the market on the supply chain, solar
Yes,
panels,
that is the biggest problem.
etcetera.
And that's why I think the US government was actually adamant about pulling the subsidies, because a lot of the money was
Could end
going to
up
pay
there.
for Chinese supplies anyways. I want to move on to a topic we've talked about on the last few episodes, John, which is the stablecoin bets
Yes,
that are happening south of the border. Well, we seem to have a stablecoin bet happening here in Canada.
yes,
We've got Tetra Digital Group in Calgary raising $10 million,
yes,
and they've done it from some financial institutions as well.
yes,
ATB Financial, Shopify, Wealthsimple, ShakePay, Purpose, and National Bank of Canada.
yes.
So obviously, this is a Canadian peg stablecoin set for launch in early 2026.
Mhm.
Obviously, pending Alberta regulatory nod approval. What are your thoughts on this? This is a stablecoin that's going to be used for B2B payments and settlement
Right,
first.
right.
Obviously, it's going to be faster, lower risk for trades, and blah, blah, blah. But there is an urgency around this around the federal level.
Yes.
We obviously think this is a good start. What are you seeing out there? What are you hearing? It's pretty impressive that we've got one of the big six, maybe
Yeah.
the sixth bank in Canada doing it. It's not the top 3 or 4, but still,
No.
a federally regulated bank is doing it. I think it's great.
Laurent Ferreira, he's a capital markets person. He understands this extremely well and where the role is on this. I like the focus on B2B payments. I am aware of at least 4 stable coins coming on stream. Now, the problem is, of course, is the regulatory. There's 2 problems right now, but this is exactly what I want to see in seeing the innovation of the product. But we still don't have the sovereign rails which I think is absolutely fundamental, and we will need the regulatory framework to empower these. But it's wonderful to see this starts with the private sector saying, I got product coming down the rails. Let's build in the other 2 components.
Yeah, we don't have the regulatory framework yet, right? We need the
Yes.
CSA's views on stablecoins to be decided on, and hopefully Tetra can be one of many. But the biggest thing I think is still going to be liquidity.
Yeah.
You're going to need liquidity providers to help kind of build up the market for this to be really actionable
Yeah.
across businesses, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, there's a very clear way on how to do that, in that you start off by not designating them as securities, but rather as payments. Number one, that's the fundamental change. And then the holding of the stable coins is deemed to be a tokenized deposit for bank regulatory capital purposes. And that changes the liquidity. And then each of the banks, they'll have their own ramps in there. They will hold it and they will create the market for liquidity. That's the key. That was the fundamental underpinning of the Genius Act. That's what you have to replicate here in Canada.
All right, let's see if it happens, John. Keep rolling along here. Some big news south of the border, but involving a well-known Canadian executive. Kaz, the COO and VP of product, has joined Opendoor as CEO after leaving, Shopify, where he had obviously a big presence at the executive level. This is a crazy story. One, because of how Opendoor has been on a tear, almost 1,000%, in the last little while since July, where like these retail activists were putting pressure on a leadership shakeup. Obviously, having him step into the CEO role with obviously a focus on AI and the buying and selling process changing for the company. This is a crazy package, though, that he was offered. It's pretty amazing. Did you see the numbers? I know the stock's up 80%. So the stock's up almost 80% today, over $10 a share. The numbers, though, that have come around that we've seen in his pay package are quite substantial. The potential payout tops 2.6, ready? Billion if the stock hits over $33 a share over 5 years.
Whoa.
Yep.
Wow.
Just comparing to his 2024 comp at Shopify, it was $800K US base plus 200,000 US shares plus a 75 million grant in 2023 of shares. So pretty significant payout there. But this is an all stock payout. It's a dollar salary with a huge Elon Musk.
Elon Musk. Where is the jurisdiction of incorporation of Opendoor? Is it Texas as well? Because they better not be Delaware.
Let's hope it's that.
And it better not be California.
But my question for you is, do you think we're going to start seeing more strong Canadian executives? I don't know how many strong Canadian tech executives they can recruit down south to join some of these fizzled, let's say, Canadian or U.S. public companies that had their big run in 2020, that are looking to change up management, like Canadians got some pretty good talent.
I mean, I think the truth is, the number of friends that I have over 30-year career that are managing very, very large US businesses, particularly in the Valley, is a very large number. So this is why I always defend when I hear another person saying that, Canadians don't have fire in the belly. I call so much bullshit on this and say, do they magically get the fire once there is, they touch US airspace and all of a sudden they're magical? No,
Right.
the issue is that they've got some great companies there, like say on Kaz. Kaz, I'm a huge supporter. I think is going to do outstanding. Well, you've got Keith Rabois and I guess Eric Wu in convince
Coming back to the board, yep.
come back in. They added some capital, massive market. It's compelling, and my concern is, and great for Kaz and his family, we better be building a lot more Canadian companies to give those opportunities, or we are gonna see a pipe leave of some of the best talent.
I still can't believe some of the moves, though, in these public market stocks, John. I mean, just the sheer volume of moves that have happened in the last month
Yeah.
or so. Let's talk about Oracle. I mean,
That's the
already
most
a
bizarre one.
juggernaut. I mean, this is a crazy move. So for listeners who are living under a rock, Oracle announced an incredible quarter, and the biggest things, though, that were pretty shocking were kind of buried a bit in the notes and in the conference call, and it all comes down to this forward contracted revenue that they have coming out for the rest of the year. So it's all on the back of OpenAI, first and foremost, and it really just shone a light on how much Oracle has been betting in this ecosystem on their own infrastructure, on their own cloud environments. And now it's finally starting to pay off. This is incredibly significant for them. We're talking $300 billion deal from 2027 to 2032 with OpenAI for 4.5 gigawatt capacity, largest ever. And these guys are just taking in a lot of spend from OpenAI.
By the way, hats off to Larry Ellison. The guy reinvents his business like every decade or so. And I guess he very temporarily became the richest man in the world because his wealth increased by $89 billion, if I recall.
Yeah, almost 100 billion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here is the issue that I have with this. First of all, the contract with OpenAI for $300 billion assumes that OpenAI can also raise $300 billion of cash over that time period, or else they're not going to be able to pay. And I'm going to guess, I don't know what the contract stickiness really is, but the same multiple of their legacy SaaS ERP businesses were very, very sticky, but they were in a declining mode for sure. This is a very different business model with massive upfront capital payments and the revenue stream. It could be a mismatch of the revenue stream on it. I'm not saying it was a bad idea to do this, but then for the markets to value this massively more than a sticky cash flowing business, and by that much, was rather surprising. And the other thing is, their competitors on the same day of that massive rise all decreased, which was a little bit bizarre too. And because they're in the same business,
You mean like the
the
Amazons and Microsoft
hyperscalers
Azure's hyperscales? Yeah.
on average went down about 1%. And maybe it was because of the size of the contract, but you know, there's a few customers, and again, we'll see where this happens. But I was surprised of the massive capital markets reaction to the pop in the stock.
Well, it's just such a big number. 360% year-over-year growth in future contracted revenue to $455 billion. I mean, you've got a cloud business that's doing still massive. Total cloud revenue was $7.2 billion, up 27% year-over-year. Cloud infrastructure revenue was up 54% to 3.3. Like, those are great numbers to begin with. But then you throw out almost a 400% year-over-year growth in future contracted revenue, all of it mostly being from like the OpenAIs of the world. That's crazy.
I know, but
But you're saying it may just be what? A flash in the pan, not maybe all
well,
comes down to the bottom line. What?
okay, So you're a VC. When you're evaluating and you look at customer concentration and everything on the do you give that the full value of it?
I hear you.
You'd go, hold on, dude. AWS, what is it, $120 billion business? And you're saying by 2030, I can't remember the time frame. By 2030, you're going to be a $400 billion. I'm not saying you're not, but I'm not going to give you the value of that. The market gave them the value.
The cost is just so big from
Massive.
OpenAI side for them to pay that bill.
Yeah, a massive customer concentration. And it's OpenAI. It's a freaking startup. And I know they've raised an it's a startup.
Well, the numbers were 115 billion in cash burn through 2029,
For
plus
OpenAI.
100 billion more in losses on owned data centers.
Right.
It is massive amounts of burn.
Yeah.
I mean, they're the highest amount of burn. We're talking about OpenAI now.
In history.
In history, and of all the hyperscalers, they're the largest in terms of burn per revenue. It's wild.
No, it was
75%.
Yeah, it's what's kind of interesting too, though, but just on a completely aside, that capital that moved into Oracle comes from someplace else. Where did it come from, by the way? Are people moving out of fixed income? Are people dropping the rest of their allocation in the tech? And
I think people are creating their own version of like the S&P, basically, with like the top like 25 names. Because like, yes, you own like the S&P and you get exposure, but you're also diluted by the other like 490 names that are not getting all the benefit moves from when these results are coming out. And so people are kind of creating their own like non-diversified, diversified S&P, if you know what I mean.
Right. No,
John, I want to get your thoughts on this op-ed piece from Khosla Ventures founder Vinod Khosla in the information. I don't know if you saw it.
I saw that.
But he's arguing that AI valuations aren't all insane, but most are. Selectively, talking about some of like the crazy outliers, but you got to be in the game is what he's saying too, if you want to get some of these big winners, right? So I find it crazy to hear someone like, Vinod, who's been and seen so much, calling it out right now. Curious why now's the time for him to say this. Obviously, we've got a ton of FOMO in the market. It's been great and easy for AI companies to raise fundraising rounds back after, right after back-to-back rounds have been done. There's a ton of like similarities maybe to the past tech booms that maybe he's also calling out, where like 95% of the companies of, megacorns, whatever they want to call them, fail. But I got to ask you, with his name and a lot of these companies that may be in that ballpark, what do you think the thoughts are in terms of him putting this out here to say it out loud?
He's telegraphing to the capital holders that he has the ability to get access to those decacorns or whatever he described, or the trillia corn, whatever.
Megacorns, I guess is what he called it.
Right.
Whatever.
This is not dissimilar. Around 2013, if you remember, Mark Andreessen said the same thing, and he was describing the power law. And what he basically said, that over the course of a dozen years or whatever he said, 15 companies per vintage year was making up 90% of the returns. And your job in the United States was you needed to get access to at least one of the 15. And it's the same power law principle. By the way, in Canada, it was you got to have at least access to the one per year, using the 10-to-1 or 20-to-1 rule. He would only write that because he's telling everybody, by the way, there's so much capital going to AI, but you're wasting your time and your investors' money if you don't get access to those massive names. I had a conversation with Founders Fund. This goes back a few years ago, and asked him, what was his AI strategy? And they said they had no clue at the time. I don't know if it changed. So they decided to put all of the capital on one bet. They just bet it on OpenAI. And he said, there's our bet. We're going to go because we really can't figure it out. So it is kind of a similar on that power law. Vinod must believe that he's already invested in some of the ones that are going to win on the power law. But I agree.
Makes sense.
I agreed with
the
article, though. There's going to be 99% carnage, like massive carnage. There has to be. And the ones that win monstrously as well. But that makes it for a very tough ecosystem of investing.
Yeah, easy to say when you're already in the ones that are potentially going to be those biggest companies of all time from a power law perspective. Starting today would be very hard if you're playing that kingmaker game in a spray and pray approach. Concentration in the big power law winners is the name of the game at that scale. I don't think it's the only way to make money in this industry, but I think in that world that you have to be in, yes, it's probably the top 10% will drive everything and the bottom 90% will end up becoming wasteland. But it definitely feels a bit self-promotional
Of course.
in the sense of the timing it's coming out right now
is.
and where we're sitting in the
Of
market.
course. I
Right?
wonder if I wonder if he's embarking on his next fundraise.
His next fundraise,
Yeah.
it's already probably been
Probably.
raised. All right. Well, until next time, John, thanks for joining the tank.
All right, take care.